not doing anything until you say go. For sure. Should we? No? Okay. All right. Are we on? Good evening, everybody. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Congregation Beth Shalom Men's Club 2022 Yom Hashoah program. I'm Todd Stelnick, and I'm the president of the CBS Men's Club. And I want to welcome all of you here at CBS and also those joining us on YouTube. Our Men's Club is very proud of the many award-winning Yom Hashoah events we have put on over the years. These programs have helped to keep the history of the Holocaust and its meaning alive for your young members, their parents, and grandparents. We also help preserve the lessons of Yom HaShoah through our Yellow Candle program, where we distribute candles to our members to light this year on Wednesday evening, April 27th, the official start of Yom HaShoah. We also include a prayer of remembrance to recite over the candle lighting. Candles are available here at the synagogue, and the Men's Club will also deliver them to those not able to pick them up. Thank you all for joining us today, and now I would like to introduce our MC for today's program, John Cross, Men's Club board member, who is also chairman of this year's program.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming. My name is John Kraus, and as Todd said, I'm the program chair for this year's Men's Club Yom HaShoah program. I am on the board of the CBS Men's Club as well as on the board of the synagogue. The Yom HaShoah program is one of the focal points of the Men's Club each and every year. As many of you know, we have a lot of fun at the Men's Club. We do all sorts of fun social events that are designed to foster community at CBS. But we also believe it is so important to provide community building through educational events like this. It is a program that we are extremely proud of, and as you may be aware, several of our programs in the past have won awards from the Federation of Jewish Men's Clubs. What makes our program so special, I think, is that it's so different from year to year, and those of you that have been here over the years know that. It would be easy to rehash the same sort of event every year, to tell the same stories of tragedy and horror that we're all unfortunately so familiar with. What makes this program, our program, so special and so unique is that we don't only or even primarily tell stories of tragedy. We focus instead on stories of hope and perseverance, to remember not only those who perished 75 years ago, but also to honor and celebrate the survivors and the spirit of survival that embodies what it means to be Jewish today. We also honor and celebrate the rescuers, those who step forward and continue to step forward today to help others, even when it is difficult to do so, even when it would be so easy to do nothing at all, simply because it's the right thing to do. It is in that spirit that we put together this year's program and brought in our special guest, Julia Entin. Now, Julia is a resident of Los Angeles, and she works at Bet Tzedek Legal Services, where she deals with reparations and other services for Holocaust survivors, as well as immigration issues and translation services, as she speaks fluent Russian. As you may be aware, Julia has garnered a lot of media attention lately for her efforts and for the efforts of several volunteer organizations to rescue Holocaust survivors from war-torn Ukraine since Russia began its brutal invasion about 2 months ago. Her story is truly inspirational, but before I tell you more about her, I'd like to turn your attention to a brief video interview that she did with ABC News not too long ago to give you a sense of the incredible work that Julia has been doing.
And welcome back on this Friday.
Just give us a second here.
And welcome back on this Friday. You know, as war rages on in Ukraine, so does
While he's doing the video, just a couple things here. We are giving some donations, obviously, to charitylegion.org, which is the organization that our guest is here for. One way to get to this link, there is a barcode back at the food table and back where the Yom Hashoah candles are. You can take a picture of it and you can download the link and it'll take you right there to the Donate Now button. Okay, and if those of you guys can't do it, it's called charitylegion.org, and there will be a blast out tomorrow with that link.
welcome back on this Friday. You know, as war rages on in Ukraine, so does the fear of being there. Now imagine this isn't your first war. You've seen it, you've lived it, even survived it. Before we were talking about Holocaust survivors. They are some of the most resilient people we have ever known, but they are older now and they need us. And all our humanitarian heroes around the world have been stepping up in more ways than ever imaginable, from volunteering to fight on the front lines to organizing food and clothing donations to assisting the evacuation of Jewish Ukrainians. Julia Entin has been doing that, and she's there. She's also the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor. She's also this week's ABC News Live humanitarian hero. Julia, so glad to have you here with us. It really is quite amazing the work that you are doing. Tell me how you're working to get these Holocaust survivors who are trapped in yet another war safely out of Ukraine.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It really is an honor to have to represent the community at large and people who are helping with this effort. It really comes from, at the moment, in my experience, from a large amount of grassroots organizations like Safebo, Israeli organizations like Yad Ezer, Lehaver, and also smaller organizations that have been formed throughout the years as a result of potential response to the aggression from Russia in such organizations like Nova Ukraine and other organizations that really are international and United States-based organizations like the Plain Compassion Crisis Response. And so what that really looks like is people throughout the world, grassroots organizations, gathering all their efforts and all the resources that they possibly have at their disposal, using their expertise through their work, social connections, social media, in order to band together and help save the most vulnerable, help save Holocaust survivors, help save people that are elderly, LGBT, minorities, again, anybody that is truly vulnerable. And really, it is an honor to be a mouthpiece for the people and for these organizations because they are truly exemplary in this effort, and they have not slept for about 3 weeks.
And you're the granddaughter of a Ukrainian Holocaust survivor. I'm just curious how this whole experience has shaped you as you've been helping these people in need.
As you can imagine, on top of being a granddaughter of Holocaust survivors, one of whom thankfully is still alive, my grandmother, I have, in my professional capacity, been helping Holocaust survivors through my work at Bet Tzedek for about 7 years. And my family roots, which obviously lie in Ukraine, specifically in Odessa and Kyiv, and my personal desire to help the people who really at this moment are incredibly vulnerable, that desire informs it all. And I think that this is the time, if ever, for the community to step up, because we really owe it to our grandparents who managed to survive what is the worst that could have befallen anybody in humanity. And so we have to pay it forward.
How do you build a rapport with these survivors? Because, I mean, they're dealing with severe trauma, health issues, they're elderly, probably a lot of post-traumatic stress as well from the Holocaust. How do you get them to trust you and believe that it's going to be okay to leave their homes behind?
Having obviously common roots really helps. Understanding the work with this particular cohort of individuals is also important. Knowing that you have particular training, which thankfully I have had, it happens to be a bit of coincidence that I have had to work with people with severe trauma, and namely how to approach the people, how to establish a rapport. I happen, again, to have an advantage because I can connect with them through their just experience, life experience, and say, I am a granddaughter of Holocaust survivors. My grandparents are from Kyiv, Odessa, throughout little tiny shtetls in Ukraine. And so here I am, and I'm here out of my sincere desire to help you. And again, it's very important to understand that these people, again, are suffering tremendous re-traumatization. And I am not sure that they have come to take in the true horror because, again, unlike many other people, they can't casually run down to the bomb shelter. They cannot easily make their way to safety. So a lot of them are unfortunately witnessing the first hand accounts of the horror that is truly happening on the streets of their cities from their windows.
Well, I know you also work with the Holocaust Service Project as a paralegal at the law firm. Now you're helping these survivors flee Ukraine. Julia Entin, really amazing what you're doing. Thank you so much for being a humanitarian hero. It was an honor to interview you.
Thank you, Bruce. So Julia rightly deserves to be called a hero for her humanitarian efforts with regard to the war in Ukraine. But her story and her family's story are not just heroic, they are a testament to the will to survive and the will to battle anti-Semitism, Nazism, communism in order to seek freedom and opportunity in a new land. Julia was born in Russia, the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors, as you heard. Julia's family was highly educated and held important governmental and university positions in Russia. They fought the Nazis in World War II, though many of her family members were lost in the Holocaust. But her family, like so many Jewish families in the Soviet Union, faced deep and persistent anti-Semitism. They were watched by the KGB, and members of her family were sent to forced labor camps for so-called crimes against the state. Julia's parents tried to shield her from the worst of anti-Semitism, but despite their best efforts, she was still very much exposed to casual anti-Semitism in her daily life, as she and her family were often referred to by derogatory and anti-Semitic slurs. Julia and her family came to the U.S. in 1993 after the fall of the Soviet Union. Her family settled first in Los Angeles and then in Orange County. She attended UCLA and then Chapman Law School. She practiced immigration law for many years before landing at Bet Tzedek in 2015. Bet Tzedek, for those of you that don't know or aren't familiar, helps elderly and poor Jews as well as non-Jewish poor and disadvantaged people with free assistance on a wide range of legal problems. Now, when the war in Ukraine broke out, again about 2 months ago, she volunteered with several nonprofit organizations to mobilize evacuations of Holocaust survivors as well as other Jews and Ukrainian citizens, as well as to send supplies and other relief aid. Now, because of the time difference between here and Eastern Europe, she often does this work in the middle of the night. While we are sleeping, she has little time to sleep as she's on calls from 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. nearly every night. She spends much of her evenings on the phone with top officials, with rabbis, with other volunteers in Ukraine, Poland, and elsewhere. It is now my great honor and privilege to welcome Julia Entin to Congregation Beth Shalom. So Julia will be interviewed, as you see, by our very own Rob Cohen, former president here at CBS. He has some questions to ask, and when he's concluded with his questions, we'll open the floor to questions from the audience. If anybody's watching on YouTube and you have questions, there is a chat function, and you can enter your questions there. I can't promise we'll get to them, but we will, time permitting. So, without further ado, Rob, take it away.
Microphone on? Microphone on?
Yes.
Welcome. Thank you, John. Julie and I had a wonderful opportunity a few days ago to Zoom to prepare for the Q&A today, and came up with a lot of good questions, things we want to discuss. And of course, as the events in the Ukraine continue to change by the day, new events occurred since we spoke that I wanted to ask you about. And one of them, I think, goes directly to obviously what your mission is with your work, which is that a 91-year-old Holocaust survivor passed away a few days ago in Ukraine as a result of the bombings that are going on there. Tell me what this means to you.
Unfortunately, the survivor was not the first nor the last. And this cuts as close and as deep as possible. It means that I have to work harder. Maybe it means I have to work longer hours. Maybe it means that I have to reach out to people that I might not be comfortable reaching out to. But what that truly says to me is that the community at large has to step up, and this is really a call for action. And I would have to say that it is also a semi-desperate call because, again, this is war. And so what I'm trying to do, I think that every single one of us needs to realize that although I personally am trying to save Holocaust survivors, what my ultimate goal is to make people understand that there is a particular challenge that the Jewish community at large may face.
your primary focus is the Holocaust survivors. There's plenty of Jews in Ukraine, plenty of refugees who are just, unfortunately, in the crosshairs of a country that is attacking for reasons that we probably don't understand very well. What is so important about rescuing the Holocaust survivors, though?
It's my opinion that they are our moral guide. If you lose the historical perspective, and if you lose the moral guide, who is going to explain to you right from wrong?
All right. Tell me about some successes, though.
Absolutely, and this is on a positive note. So far, so sorry. So far, I myself have managed to evacuate 7 Holocaust survivors. That's as of yesterday. As of today, that's up to 9. So I'm very excited. I am, in fact, so excited I was a little bit overcome this morning, quite frankly. These survivors are going to various countries. I have personally transferred survivors to Germany, to Israel, and one of them now to the United States. So I am thrilled that I have kept in touch with all of them, and I intend on doing so because some of my work is not just rescuing the survivors out of Ukraine, but also making sure that wherever they end up, that they are treated with the dignity, respect that they deserve. One of the, I think, most heartfelt stories that has a tinge of sadness to it is one of the survivors that is now in the United States. Her name is Margarita. Unfortunately, I attempted to rescue them in the first few days of the war. But when the transport arrived, unfortunately, Margarita's husband was not able to be rescued at that moment because he was having a very hard time, both physically and psychologically. Valeria unfortunately passed away. And when I spoke to Margarita, which was almost daily, I let her know that if I have to personally go to Ukraine and bring her out, that's what I'm going to have to do. So she should think about that, because it's going to present a couple of challenges for myself personally as well. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with my kids while I'm doing that. So I am very thrilled that she is now in New Jersey with her brother, and they're doing quite well. And she is connected with all the Jewish services I could possibly think about.
It was interesting when we spoke the other day. Your process is not just getting them out, placing them, that there is further work that you do after they have been placed. And in a lot of instances, these people may be placed with family members that they don't really have good relationships with, or even lengthy relationships with, or they may be placed in places where they have no contacts. So how do you maintain that relationship, and what does that look like for the now newly placed survivor?
I try to keep in touch, and that's what I believe is part of my mission. The continuous care. It's similar to what I do with the Holocaust survivors here in the United States. I believe that, again, they deserve all the service I could possibly provide to them. And what I have tried to do is I've tried to ask the hard questions. If you choose to go somewhere, wherever it is that you choose to go, do you have a connection to that place? What is your connection? And how can I help you? That literally means that I'm going to involve some of my family members in my work, specifically in Israel. One of the Holocaust survivors, her intended place of final destination is an assisted living facility near Haifa. It is in fact run by the organization Yad Yazer, and she did have a caveat. She does not have any immediate relatives that she can talk to. And so I said, that's no problem. My cousin's a heifer. So I guess what I have to admit is that I am definitely tapping into the community, into our community, to help me in doing what I do. And part of that is also providing these people with a warm welcome, letting them know that we are their family.
What's the biggest challenge dealing with the survivors?
I would say that there are actually two, mobility issues and early cognitive decline. The reason why that's very difficult is because I would have to, if you picture Ukraine, unfortunately what you're currently picturing now, if the survivor lives, let's say, in a standard apartment building, it probably does not have an elevator. If it does have an elevator, it's probably currently not functioning very well, which means that I'm going to have to get the survivor out, logistically speaking, out of the building that, let's say, is on a 4th floor. That means it's going to take numerous resources, including numerous people, in order to provide them that rescue. And secondly, it's because, unfortunately, when you have someone who is faced with severe emotional stress, I cannot, again, explain really what it means to be in the middle of a war situation, but they are in the middle of a war. There are bombs that they're hearing outside their windows. So you have to respect the level of inherent stress in combination with the fact that they might not fully be intaking just how terrible the situation is outside, because they cannot just casually walk outside, and they don't have much communication with the outside world.
I would offer this as a hypothetical, but I'm sure it's not. I'm sure that there are survivors that you're either working with or trying to identify who don't have mobility problems. They don't have cognitive decline. They still just don't want to leave, right?
That's correct. If you think about the particular group of survivors in Ukraine, then chances are once they either remained in Ukraine throughout the war, or they were evacuated and then they came back. And as somebody that is familiar with living in the former Soviet Union, there's the possibility that they traveled outside of their city, their country, is relatively limited. So that means that their just perspective on life and their tie-in is exactly to their city. This is what they know. This is their home. This is their safe place, and it has been since World War II. So what you're trying to really tell them is, won't you casually leave your home and everything you knew? And that is definitely a difficulty in itself.
We saw this happen almost 80 years ago. And by the time a great many people came to realize what was going on, it was too late to leave. And those who had survived, probably, had they been asked, if you knew this was going to happen, would you have gotten out when you had the chance? The answer would be yes. This is a parallel to back then. And yet you're still dealing with the same issues that people were dealing with 80 years ago, seeing the oncoming tide and saying, this is my home, I'm not going to leave. How do you break through that? Can you?
You have to understand the difficulties that you're dealing with and the limitations that you have, and you have to accept some of those limitations. And with that acceptance, you also have to then fight for the people that you know that you may be able to convince to leave. And what I try to do is, again, I try to refer to them to their other family, and that's hopefully us.
When we talked the other day, I think I probably expressed a little my naivete. because I suggested that 80 years later, far better political landscape than it was back then, that the Western countries are far more open to bringing in refugees, that the knowledge of what's going on over there is far more prevalent than 80 years ago. And you, unfortunately, had to disabuse me of that notion. How similar is it today from 80 years ago trying to get Jews out of these occupied territories or the territories that are on the verge of being occupied?
I think that it would behoove everyone to keep a little bit of a perspective in mind. And this perspective is the following. To me, it's a little bit easier because I happen to have the benefit of being born there. So my filter in life tends to go dark often. But today, if everybody was paying attention in the French elections, Marine Le Pen got 41%. This is Europe. This is 2022. I'm not sure, besides Mr. Putin, what kind of a wake-up call does anybody really need? I have a very real fear, and I think it's been pretty justified by an individual like Mr. Putin, which literally has recently put out a publication which very eerily resembles Mein Kampf. I suggest you read it, because what Mr. Putin intends on doing, I certainly am terrified of. And if anybody tells you otherwise, I can go ahead and dissuade you of the belief that if you think that a former KGB agent can be reasoned with, I assure you, they cannot.
The Ukraine has a checkered history when it comes to the Jews. There are still a lot of hurt feelings about how the Jews were treated during the Holocaust in the Ukraine. How do we answer that question? Why are we going to help? Why are we sending aid? They have not been tolerant of the Jews. They were not very respectful, and that's a very diplomatic word. What do you say to people who say we should not even be involved in the Ukraine and whatever happens there, especially as Jews?
Never deny history. Never. A fact is a fact. Don't twist it. It is the absolute truth that a lot of Ukrainians were not just complicit in the systematic murder of the Jewish population, but did so gleefully. It would also behoove us to remind ourselves that there are other nations that were involved in World War II that are now not just supportive of the Jewish population at large, but run what is the biggest reparation program in the world, and that's Germany. I am the last person to say that money can undo everything that they did. Absolutely not. That's preposterous. But I will tell you that to convince a politician now that they should pay money or provide services to a population they no longer have any historical connection to, that's pretty extraordinary. Equally extraordinary that one of the biggest synagogues in the world happens to be in Ukraine. Their current drive and their current relationship with their Jewish population, quite frankly, is very thrilling, and I would say much better than a lot of other European countries at the moment. So you have to understand that there is a necessity to understand that there better be a concept of redemption, because if there isn't, what are we as humans attempting to live in the future for?
Let me ask this question. and I'm not asking for the historical answer or the historian's answer. My perception being Germany's complete about-face as far as relation with the Jews is probably mostly out of embarrassment. Okay, I think that they are embarrassed about the country they became, the people that they allowed to lead the country. And the majority of the people who stood by and did nothing have now obviously seen, not necessarily the error of their ways, but they've seen how damaging that was. Is Ukraine's turnaround similarly based on an embarrassment factor, based on their prior treatment, or is there something else you think that's going on there?
I think that there is something else. And I think that it's a little bit unique to the satellite countries that used to be a part of the Soviet Union. I think that the Ukrainian people wanted to differentiate themselves very much so from Russia specifically, let's be honest. And they understood that the embrace of the Jewish people, it didn't just become sort of a brotherly thing. I think that they allowed especially the actually religious, very religious Jewish organizations to function within the country and to gather the community and really have the community prosper within Ukraine in the last 20 to 15 years. And it became a very large and very active community, highly engaged and now well-traveled, and that includes Israel. So I think that it is very unique. I think the situation is very unique, and I think that it is born out of their sincere desire to become not just a country that is known as being more tolerant, but also, quite frankly, just more international.
It's really important to understand how significant messaging is, because for so long, Ukraine, as part of Russia, believed what they were being told about Jews, about inferiors, whatever it may be. And once they gained independence and were able to pull the wool from over their eyes, they realized that a lot of the messaging was skewed, to use I can't come up with a better term.
Yes, absolutely. I think that they are, in that sense, very lucky because they don't, at the moment, live behind an informational iron curtain. I think that they are not only consumers of what one would label Western media and Western thought, but also they have more opportunities to now travel outside of their country. And I think that because there is so much international activity within Ukraine and international investment, as well as simply the communication, you have more direct and more open communication with, let's say, your relatives that are living abroad. And you are much more open and welcoming to their point of view. And it isn't bastardized by basically saying and twisting it by saying that, well, your relatives have kind of an American-based view, a Western view, and that in itself isn't used as a derogatory term. So I think that's a very important difference, because when you are in fact allowed to know alternative sources of information, then you're going to really start thinking more independently.
This wasn't something that you began doing just a couple months ago. I mean, your work with Bet Tzedek has been focused on dealing with Holocaust survivors. Was that something that you desired to get into, something you fell into? We don't always end up doing the things we expect we're going to do when we're 5 years old. Because you are certainly descendant from Holocaust survivors, was this something that was a passion of yours that you knew you wanted to do?
I was actually personally reached out to because there was a need within Bet Tzedek for somebody that had the language abilities for survivors. because so many of the survivors that are alive today and are present in Los Angeles, a lot of them are Russian speaking. And there was a deficit of people that who were willing and able to take on the service that was really needed. They reached out and I said, absolutely. Are you guys trying to pull some trick on me? Because this is literally my direct personal connection topped with a particular skill set that I have. So it felt a bit of serendipity.
Right person, right place, right time.
Yeah.
So prior to the current mission, what was your dealings with Holocaust survivors? How did you help them out?
So what I do at Bet Tzedek Legal Services is something called, it's a unique thing. It's called wraparound services. When a Holocaust survivor ends up at Bet Tzedek, the idea is to help them with pretty much anything and everything that we can. Usually people don't think about government benefits as being related to legal services, but it actually is. They don't think about some sort of, again, governmental programs that are, related to the Holocaust survivors as being also somehow connected to legal services, but they are. And so what we do is we will take on any challenge that a survivor wants to throw at us. If there's a problem that is legally related, we will try to solve it. And I've been doing that for about 7 years now. We work directly in connection with social services like Jewish Family Services to provide them what is the easiest access possible. So we want them to feel like they're really cared for.
How many survivors are there in LA that you're able to deal with?
That is one of the most complicated questions, actually. We get this question often because we're asked to pull statistics. I can tell you what Bet Tzedek's perception is here or there. On my personal, let's say, spreadsheet, the survivors that I serve is over 1,000. So if you estimate that me personally, I have active cases for over 1,000 survivors. There is an estimate that the Holocaust Museum would give out, and I would say that their estimate is somewhere about 15,000. We actually think it's significantly more because we're constantly presented with the following. Lots of survivors don't want to self-identify. Lots of survivors do not think of themselves as survivors because they believe that they were children during the Holocaust. And in their eyes, a survivor is somebody who was an adult. So they are hesitant to identify themselves as such. And so our estimate is actually much greater. I would put it at somewhere 25,000.
And do you have an idea of how many survivors are in Ukraine?
Yeah. According to the estimates, again, the official estimates, it's about 10,000. Again, I would run up that number to more than 20,000. Because again, one of the hardest things is to have a Holocaust survivor in Ukraine self-identify during a war. How do you think that goes? Probably not well. So I think that it's a question, it's difficult to ask. And I think that because it's difficult to ask, people should be a little bit more realistic about the estimates, again, because people are not willing to self-identify.
So in that instance, how do you find them? How do you locate the survivor in Ukraine to offer the services to them?
In my personal work with the survivors in Ukraine, I've been a little bit fortunate because people know to reach out to me. What does that mean? That means that people abroad reach out to me, people from the United States, people from Israel, and people from Europe. And they say, I know of a Holocaust survivor. I know of someone that needs help within Ukraine that is a survivor. Can you please help them? And that really, I think, it kind of naturally came about because people knew what I do here. And so they began asking around, and I didn't intend on doing this work, let me tell you. But that is what fell into my hands, and so I had to help.
Without giving us the secret recipe, what's your process? Start, middle, success.
The process, again, it's a little bit, I don't know if everybody understands. Extraction out of a war zone of a Holocaust survivor is not something that you announce on TV prior to the completion of the project. So we're very careful about what we disclose and the actual context that we use, because as you can imagine, some people would really like us not to succeed. And I'm not talking about people within Ukraine, but I'm talking about people outside of Ukraine at this point. But what we usually do is, once we get a contact number for a survivor, we will initially reach out to them, and usually I do that personally. And the question is relatively simple. I would like to know what it is that you need, because I am here to offer whatever it is that you need. I'm not here to discuss evacuations. I'm not here to discuss any specifics. I'm just here to ask you what you need. And I'm asking you not to put you in an awkward situation that you, as a person who've been independent and a survivor, literally a survivor all your life. I'm here to do it as a friend. I'm here to do it as an extended family member. So that's what we do first. And you have to establish that rapport, because without that rapport, that person is just a stranger who has a lifetime worth of skepticism aimed against you. And you certainly cannot come out and say, hey, listen, I'm gonna come pick you up in about 12 hours. Please don't take most of the things that you own. I just need you to take a piece of luggage, because realistically speaking, that's all I can do for you. So that's what we do. We establish the rapport. We find out what the person's needs are, and then we work from there. If that takes weeks, then so be it. Sometimes it does take weeks. And we will try to find the services and match them with the services that are available. And if we can't find the services that are available, then we will get the services that are not available. And that includes specific medical transportation. Unfortunately, we cannot fly. It's definitely a great limitation that you cannot fly in, nor can you directly fly out, which means that you have to get the person first out of the country somewhere, anywhere. Moldova, Poland, Hungary, Romania, somewhere out of Ukraine. So that way, then you can figure out where they would like to go and how they would like to get there. But we definitely provide medical transportation if that is something that is necessary, including medical personnel if that is necessary. So we pretty much do whatever is needed. And then once we get the person to safety in a country that is safe, then again, they can let us know what the needs are. We have food, lodging, shelter, medicine.
How big is your team?
At this point, it's not very big. It's under 10 people, but that does not include the people that we collaborate with, which at this point, I am very hardened to say that there are unbelievable amount of volunteers in Ukraine from all over the world. We used a Norwegian emergency vehicle the other week. I mean, somebody from England donated a minivan that was converted to an emergency vehicle. It's thrilling to see people step up, really step up.
10,000 more. Overwhelmed? Oh, are you overwhelmed by the number of people that could benefit from your assistance?
You have to do what you have to do.
Save one person, right? When we spoke last week, you said the most difficult question that you had been asked. How long can you do this? And now I'm asking it.
however long it takes.
What do you need?
There are a couple of practical things that obviously every volunteer organization needs, and we're a very small volunteer organization, as you imagine, so we can't tap into the funds that larger volunteer organizations have, although I am desperately working around the clock to try to partner up with some larger organizations. But I'm going to be absolutely frank. Money is always great. And one of the reasons it is we do something a little bit interesting. We try to employ the people that were displaced from Eastern Ukraine in order to provide the services. If you can imagine how many people are out of work, these people are all ordinary people. They're out of work. They don't. It's a war. How are they going to feed their kids? How are they going to feed themselves? So what we try to do is we try to make it literally as grassroots as possible, and we try to provide them as much compensation as possible for the work that they're doing. And quite frankly, they're really doing it for. I'm actually embarrassed to tell you for how little they're doing it for, because that sort of brings me a little bit of a sense of shame myself. But they're definitely also stepping up and providing the need to their fellow countrymen. So we would definitely like to provide them as much help as possible. And obviously we need as many members of the community to become engaged. If that means that you have a resource that I'm not aware of, please make me aware of it. If you know someone with some international connections that could somehow help me out in my effort, please give me a call. This is part of the reason why I am up for a majority of the time. Not too much sleep, but that's what I gotta do. And if you know Russian or Ukrainian, it's going to be needed here for all the refugees that are going to come. Or if you can offer something to them, because there will be people.
You take one of your very rare naps, you wake up and find out that the invasion has been repelled and Russia has gone back home. Job over? Mission accomplished? What's next?
Land lease. Does anybody know anything about land lease? It's the reconstruction effort after World War II. The United States and the European governments signed a pact into law, which provided for reconstruction of much of Europe. And that is what we're looking forward to, reconstruction. That's the hope, right? So that way people don't necessarily have to flee their home, that we can provide a life for them in their home.
Should we open it up to questions? Do we have any questions? Oh, in the back, Jody Monteleone, Hal, behind.
I don't think I need a mic. My next door neighbors brought their 3 relatives out, and
I can hear you very well.
teachable. So my next door neighbors brought their 3 relatives out, and their aunt wanted to stay and didn't want to leave. But my question is, they brought them in through Mexico, and they crossed the border there, and there's a whole system set up at the border with Ukrainian assistance. Is that how all the refugees were getting into America, through Mexico?
You've asked a very uncomfortable question for the United States government. That way is going to be closed as of April 25th. Because nobody wants to see a lot of refugees at the southern border. The Biden administration has announced that they have a new program that they're going to establish on April 25th. It's going to involve the refugee applying at a U.S. consulate for what is now known as humanitarian parole. that is what they would like to see. So it is a program that we know very little about because the details of it have not been established yet. But what you asked, again, I would like to emphasize, is a very uncomfortable question for a lot of people.
And we discussed this last week. Again, my perception that 80 years later, more countries know what's going on, are more welcoming, are more open, are more receptive to refugees of war, because 80 years ago they were turning people away. And that's not necessarily true, is it?
Unfortunately, the Holocaust survivor that I brought that is currently in New Jersey, I cannot get into the details of her legal limbo, but she's not here as a refugee. Allow me to let that sink in for you. I had to bring a Holocaust survivor into the United States, not under refugee status, that I am a beneficiary of.
And more difficult if the refugee doesn't have family here. And family being very specifically defined, not distant cousin 8 times removed.
That is correct.
More questions over here.
While you can't fly them out, how difficult is it to actually leave the country at the border of Ukraine?
So fortunately, through humanitarian organizations, they get specific paperwork to leave the country. So unless you are a man of fighting age, which is 18 to 60, you're going to be able to leave. And the humanitarian organization basically fills out all the appropriate paperwork, and there isn't too much hassle actually at the borders to let the refugees go. It's simply a matter of waiting a line for a very long time and waiting for someone to check your paperwork, although medical evacuations are able to proceed very fast. So that way, if you have an actual emergency vehicle, you will likely be processed very fast.
You talked about giving donations. Was that to charitylegion.org or Bet Tzedek or where?
Okay. I will answer that question if you don't mind. Yes, if you could please go to charitylegion.org and donate there. There's a donate button. We would highly appreciate it. We're running a campaign. Hopefully, I'm trying to get to the funds matched. We will see where that goes. I literally am I cannot emphasize this enough, guys. I'm one person, just one, and with a very tiny group of other people. So it's about a fifth of this room. So
One last question, Hal?
I'm curious to know about the refugees that come to Mexico to come into the United States. How do they deal with the language barrier?
if you mean the language barrier in Mexico, is that correct? Am I understanding your question?
Once they come into the United States and Mexico,
Oh.
for that matter.
Okay, so there are a couple of issues, right? So you have the language barrier in Mexico and you have the language barrier in the United States. I can speak to the language barrier in the United States. I didn't speak a word of English when I came here. No big deal, you'll pick it up. That's what you do when you have to survive. You will learn it. And I think that the Ukrainian population has an interesting and I think yet undisclosed advantage to themselves. They're actually technically bilingual already because a lot of them speak Russian and Ukrainian. And I understand that there is a perception that those languages are almost identical. That's not quite true, actually. A Polish person and a Ukrainian person will understand each other better than a Ukrainian and a Russian speaker. So that's kind of an interesting caveat, and that's, again, getting into linguistics. But in terms of Mexico, what happened in Mexico is a few ladies from the United States saw the problem. they saw the problem balloon into over 2,000 people. And they dropped their jobs and they went to Mexico, to Tijuana. And then they set up a booth in an airport. And then they called all their friends. And then all those friends went and volunteered about a week at a time in order to help process the refugees. They were essentially helping the CBP do their job. And then they lobbied governmental organizations, lobbied the CBP hard. They were very convincing ladies. They're still very convincing ladies. And that organization I'm also going to shout out because, again, their efforts I am also involved in from a little bit of a more policy perspective. They are at ccfrusa.org. And again, just regular ladies with jobs who dropped everything because they saw a need.
We're going to wrap up. One final question. Start with a comment, then a question. You heard John when he introduced the program as part of the Men's Club annual Yom HaShoah program. We've attempted at various times to highlight uplifting aspects. We all, unfortunately, do tire a little bit of the nastiness that we all know took place. So it really has become about focusing on the good that came out of such horrific events. And this is clearly one of the good. Not only is it one of the good in relation to what happened 80 years ago, but it's emblematic of what we need to be doing now. Because when the Holocaust survivors pass away, it's going to be very easy to forget what happened. So what you're doing is you're cementing their legacy by showing us that our generation still cares about what happened back then. But the future, as it relates to the treatment of Jews, is definitely uncertain. Do you have optimism? Do you see a light there for us? What do you see?
You can and you must get involved. Because the second that you forget is the second that we're all at risk again. And I think the most important part is to be able to tell our children and to remember. Somebody asked me another very challenging question the other day. When I'm on the phone with some of these Holocaust survivors, I hear the bombs. What's that like? You bear witness. So I think that if we all teach the younger generation that they must bear witness to even the most horrific events that are happening in humanity so that they don't forget who they are. Because again, the second that they forget who they are is the second that this community is going to be challenged again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Rob, for the thoughtful questions. Thank you for all of you who asked questions. And for those of you that didn't get a chance, perhaps Julia will give you a minute after we're done here. I'd like to introduce Rabbi Jay Siegel to talk about Yom HaShoah, what it means to CBS, what we're doing here at CBS, and what we can continue to do. Rabbi.
Well, shalom, everyone. Didn't want to clear the stage. I just wanted to say personally, thank you very much. And Bet Tzedek is a very important organization that has done an extreme amount of important work in Los Angeles and abroad, and I'm grateful that we've had an opportunity to learn with you today. And tzedakah, the word tzedakah is in the root of Bet Tzedek. Tzedakah, of course, we know means charity or giving, but really, and I think you'll agree, it means equity, bringing people to a place where they can truly be a part of our society. And always, 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 tzedakah comes before shalom, before peace. And it is upon each and every one of us. If we want peace and we say we want peace, we have to give tzedakah. That can mean many, many different things. One of the things that we were able to do here was our students in our Hebrew school, grades kindergarten through 7th grade, over the course of several years have raised over $2,000, and they have generously given to this cause that you have started. And what we asked was that our larger congregation match, and they did. So we have raised over $4,000 for you and the work that you have done. Don't cry, because you're going to make me cry, because every dollar helps. And you heard how the most needy in our community need, and it is up to us just to step up and allow that equity to happen. And in some small way, we as a community here, who frankly haven't been touched by war, can help bring peace to the world. We were going to provide a check for you today, but I think some people still may be giving, and we wanted to conclude that campaign, and we will. And then we will happily come and deliver all that we have raised, small amount, but I hope it can affect at least a little bit of change. And so I wanted to also, at this point, I'd like to invite up Josh Kaplan and Arthur Cohen, if you'd like to help, in a ceremony for those truly that we've lost because of the Holocaust. And this year, so please come up. And one of the things, and Cantor Cohen, if you could also join us. And one of the things here, as we will light, in just a moment, we will rise for this tekis, for this ceremony. Generally, 6 candles will be lit, obviously in memory of the 6 million and 1 million children that were murdered systematically just yesterday, just about 80 years ago. But this year we have 7 candles. The idea behind the 7 candles is for many reasons, one of which is the survivors that we heard today. And one of the most important themes today is that initially many of us want to help, want to do something, but it is the years, I should say the months and the years that come that really help is needed. This isn't just a one-off, a one-day kind of occurrence. And so this 7th candle reminds us that there are still survivors out there that need our support and need our help. And in addition to this, there is also an aspect to the Holocaust Remembrance Day, or Yom Hashoah, is that we also remember those who were heroes. And the word for hero in Hebrew, gevurah, comes from gever, which means somebody who steps up. It literally means man. But I want you to think for a moment what that means is, what does it mean to be a man in this world? What does it mean to be a real person, a mensch, to step up? What it means is what you have done. You inspire people to act. And inspiration means to breathe new air into lungs. And I hope that you were inspired by today, by the talk, by the ability to see that your actions truly matter, and that we must breathe new air into what may seem like an old tradition, so that we continue to support our heroes and become heroes. And so I ask that you please rise. And we ask and we say a psalm, why, God, do you remain so distant, so silent in times of trouble? Why should the wicked be allowed to scoff at God, saying to themselves that you will not notice? Break the might of the wicked, search out their hidden evil. And an anonymous poem or thought written on a wall of a cellar in Cologne. I believe in the sun even when it is not shining. I believe in love even when not feeling it. I believe in God even when God is silent. And our cantor, were you going to, please, Josh?
We light this yellow candle to rekindle God's flame, to shine his light upon the world once again, to sanctify the memories of the millions of souls, to honor their prayers and all their lost souls. We bless their existence by being alive, to light this yellow candle as proof we survived. Never again.
We remember them. At the rising of the sun and its going down, we remember them. At the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. At the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. At the shining of the sun and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. At the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. At the beginning of the year and at its end, we remember them. As long as we live, they too will live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joy we crave to share, we remember them. When we have decisions that are difficult to make, we remember them. When we have achievements that are based on theirs, we remember them. As long as we live, they too will live. For they are now part of us as we remember them. El Malei Rachamim, God full of compassion who dwells on high, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering wings of Shekhinah, your divine presence. El Malei Rachamim, a prayer that originated in the Jewish communities of Western and Eastern Europe, where it was recited for the martyrs of the Crusades and the Ukrainian Polish pogroms of the mid-1600s, is a plea that the soul be granted mechuna nechona, proper rest in Gan Eden. Through our prayers and good deeds, we hope to earn God's compassion for the departed souls of those who are dear to us. The statement is made that the worshiper resolves to contribute to charity in remembrance of his or her soul. El Malei Rachamim includes the phrase, on the wings of the divine presence, rather than the more common under the wings of the divine presence. The latter phrase implies heavenly protection from danger by using the analogy of a bird spreading its protective wings over its young. The analogy is reversed when speaking of spiritual elevation. God's presence is compared to a soaring eagle that puts its young on top of its wings and carries them aloft. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamaromim, Hamsei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim Utehorim, Kezochar Harakia, Mazhirim, Lenishmot Yakirenu Shelchalchu, Leolamim. Bal harachamim yastirem beseter kanafav leolamim. Vitzror bitzror hachayim et nishmatam. Adonai hu nachalatam. Ve'anuchu beshalom al mishkavam. Ve'nomar Amen.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the souls of all of our brethren who perished in the Shoah, men, women, and children of the house of Israel who were slaughtered, suffocated, and burned to ashes. May their memory endure and inspire deeds of charity and goodness in our lives. May their souls thus be bound up in the bond of life. May they rest in peace, and let us all say,
Amen.
Amen. My prayer, I don't know to whom to offer it, but I offer it. My prayer, I have no one to whom to say it, but I say it. My prayer, it freezes to my palate, but I still have it. My prayer, it wells up in a fit of rage, I must speak it. My prayer, it falters again and again, yet I persist. My prayer rises up over 6 million graves, yet I say it. My prayer fails, vanished without words, yet I offer it. My prayer is to the one who may not even hear, still I say it. We conclude with the mourner's Kaddish on page 203 if you have a Siddur. If not, please just respond with Amen. Yitgadal v'yikadash shemei rabbah, ve'alma divra chirutei ve'amlich malchutei, v'chayechon u'yomechon u'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, Bagala v'zman kariv v'imru, Amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach le'olam u'me'almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal, shemei d'kudsha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru, Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, Amen. Oseh shalom bin romav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru,
Amen.
May the one who brings peace to the universe bring peace to us, to all Israel and all humankind, and let us all say,
Amen.
Please be seated.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, everyone else. We're going to wrap up the program, but I just want to give a reminder that if you have not picked one up yet, I see many of you have. The yellow bags have the Yom HaShoah candles for this year. The actual day of Yom HaShoah this year is Wednesday night, so please light your candle on Wednesday night. We included the prayers that you can do as you do that. The letter also includes a link to the Men's Club PayPal account if you want to donate any money through that means. In addition to the QR codes that are on the table in the back, we will give any money we get through that link as well to Julia's cause. So feel free to donate either directly through the QR codes there or through the PayPal account that we provide. Either way is fine. Just want to do a quick couple thank yous. First of all, to Julia for coming out here and giving your time to us. I know you're busy. I know you're tired. It was really incredible to hear from you, and we look forward to having a relationship with CBS going forward, if you're willing. I want to also thank Hal Dash, who did so much to help put this event together. Much of that time he was on the East Coast, so thank you, Hal, for bringing Julia here and for everything else. I want to thank Rob Cohen for putting together really incredible questions, really incredible and insightful questions. Thank you, Rob. Also, thank you, of course, to Rabbi Jay, to Cantor Ray for everything they've done and continue to do for our synagogue. To Robin Seppi, as always, for helping us get all of these things together, as she always does. To Bruce Neft, who's here, and Jeff Janofsky, who is not, who helped with our technical support. To Lori Malin and the other ladies of the Sisterhood who helped get the refreshments that are on the back table there. You can help yourself, too, before you go. And finally, to Todd Stelnick, the president of the CBS Men's Club, to Andrew Weiss, to Josh Kaplan, and the other members of the Men's Club board who helped in different ways. So with that, I conclude this year's Yom HaShoah event. Thank you all for coming.
you.